I wasn't invited to my daughter's wedding in Paris, the same wedding I helped pay for. She told me by email, if you want to be a part of it, you can watch through the Google Earth window, lol. So I just said, sure, enjoy your big day. The next morning she wouldn't stop calling me. But me, I was way too busy to pick up. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Have you ever been excluded from an event you paid for? The phone was vibrating against the mahogany desk, buzzing like an angry hornet. I didn't silence it. I didn't flip it over. I just watched the name Brittany light up the screen over and over again. I work as a senior logistics coordinator for one of the largest shipping firms in Seattle. My entire life is built on managing chaos. When a container falls off a ship in the Pacific, I don't cry. I don't scream at the ocean. I calculate the loss, adjust the manifest, and keep the rest of the fleet moving. Brittany had just made the mistake of thinking she was my daughter, but as of 8:05 a.m. she was just a liability in my supply chain. Outside my apartment window, the Seattle rain was doing what it always does, washing the city grey. It was quiet here. But over in Paris, where it was already late afternoon, I knew the storm was just making landfall. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed with the blue light of my international banking portal. My hands didn't shake. There was no adrenaline, no racing heart, just the cool metallic taste of clarity. I navigated to the pending transfers tab. There it was, recipient Chateau de Valet, amount $68,000. This was the final payment. The money that would unlock the doors, pay the caterers, and ensure that my daughter could marry Preston, a man whose parents apparently thought a logistics manager was too blue-collar to be seen in their wedding photos. They wanted my money. They just didn't want me. In psychology, there is a concept called the grey rock method. It is usually a defense mechanism you use against narcissists. You become uninteresting, you become unresponsive, you become a rock, you deny them the emotional reaction they feed on. Brittany wanted me to beg. She wanted me to call her crying, pleading to be let back in, promising to stay in the back row. She wanted the drama because drama makes her feel important. I wasn't going to give her drama. I was going to give her silence, and I was going to give her a bill. I moved the cursor over the cancel button. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the custom dress I had already paid for or the first-class tickets I had bought them. That was a sunk cost. In logistics, you never throw good money after bad. I clicked. Transaction cancelled. The screen blinked once and the line item disappeared. Just like that, $68,000 remained in my account and the Chateau de Valet remained unpaid. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. Mom, are you there? The venue manager is asking for the confirmation code. I took a sip of my coffee. It was black and bitter, exactly how I like it. I didn't reply. I simply closed the laptop and turned to look at the rain. The war had started, but I wasn't going to fire a single shot. I had just cut off the ammunition. I didn't close my laptop immediately. Instead, I opened a different file. It was a spreadsheet I had meticulously maintained for the last 18 months, labeled simply Wedding Expenses, XLSX. I right-clicked on the file name and typed a new title, Sunk Costs. In business, a sunk cost is money that has already been spent and cannot be recovered. If a project is failing, you don't keep pouring capital into it just because you have already spent $1 million. You cut your losses, you walk away. I scrolled down the rows. Row 4, custom lace gown from Milan, $12,000 paid. Row 7, first-class flights for Brittany and Preston to Paris, $4,200 paid. Row 9, the 5-star hotel deposit for the bridal party, $8,000 paid. $42,000. That was the price of admission I had already paid just to be treated like a nuisance. For years I told myself that this was what mothers do. We give, we support, we lift. But staring at those numbers, I finally admitted the ugly truth I had been avoiding since Brittany was a teenager. I wasn't a mother to her. I was a vending machine. There is a specific psychological dynamic that happens when a child views a parent strictly as a resource. It is called the vending machine complex. As long as the machine dispenses what you want, the money, the car, the tuition, the wedding, you don't really think about the machine. You don't ask the machine how its day was. You don't thank the machine for existing. You just push the button and take the product. But the moment the machine stops working, the moment the button is pressed and nothing comes out, you don't feel concern for the machine. You feel rage, you kick it, you shake it, you scream at it because it has failed its only purpose, to serve you. Brittany wasn't calling me because she missed me. She was kicking the machine. I thought back to when my husband died. Brittany was 12. I was left with a mortgage, 2 grieving children, and a terrifying silence in the house. I didn't fall apart. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I worked 60-hour weeks at the terminal. I took double shifts during the holidays. I made sure they had the brand name clothes and the private tutors, even if I was wearing shoes with holes in the soles. I thought I was protecting them from struggle, but I wasn't. I was protecting them from reality. I had curated a life where they believed money just appeared like magic. I had taught them that my needs were secondary to their desires. I had trained them to devalue me. The Google Earth comment wasn't an anomaly. It was the logical conclusion of 20 years of my own parenting. I had made myself invisible, a silent infrastructure for their lives, and now they were simply treating me that way. I looked at the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet. $42,000 gone. A younger version of me would have cried over the waste, but the woman sitting in that chair watching the rain streak the glass felt something else entirely. I felt like an auditor who had finally discovered the embezzlement. I wasn't the villain of this story. I was the bank, and the bank had just closed for business. I saved the file and dragged it into a folder named Archive. I took a deep breath. My phone was still buzzing, but the sound didn't annoy me anymore. It sounded distant, like a fly trapped behind glass. I had stopped the bleeding. Now I just had to wait for the patient to realize they were in shock. Paris is 9 hours ahead of Seattle. By the time I poured my second cup of coffee, it was already late afternoon at the Chateau de Valette. The venue required the final balance to be cleared 48 hours before the ceremony. That deadline had passed exactly 14 minutes ago. My phone screen was no longer just buzzing, it was convulsing. 43 missed calls, 19 text messages. The tone of the messages had shifted violently. At 6 a.m. they were confused. "Mom, the bank says there's a delay." By 7 a.m. they were frantic. "Mom, please pick up, they're threatening to pull the catering." By 8 a.m. the panic had calcified into rage. I opened the messages not to reply but to archive them for my records. "Documentation is everything. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing," Brittany wrote. "But Andrew's parents are furious. You are embarrassing us. Fix this now." Then a voicemail from Preston, the aristocrat. I pressed play and put it on speaker, setting the phone down on my kitchen counter next to a bowl of lemons. Diane, his voice was tight, clipped, trying to sound authoritative but cracking at the edges. "Look, I don't know if this is some sort of technical glitch or if you're having an episode, but my mother is asking questions. We have standards to maintain. If that money isn't wire confirmed in the next hour, we are going to have a very different conversation about your future access to our family." I laughed, a dry, sharp sound in the empty kitchen. Access to our family, as if they were a country club I had failed to pay dues for. They still didn't get it. They thought they were holding the keys to the gate. They didn't realize I was the one who had built the fence. Then came the social media offensive. My iPad pinged. It was a notification from Instagram. Brittany had posted a story. I tapped it open. It was a black screen with small white typewriter font text, the aesthetic of the digitally victimized. Heartbroken, it read, "It's crazy how the people supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. Trying to stay positive for my wedding, but dealing with toxic narcissism is exhausting. Send good vibes, boundaries, family trauma." I watched the view count tick up. 300 views, 400. Comments were flooding into her DMs, I was sure of it. "Oh my God, you poor thing, don't let them ruin your day, Queen." She was weaponizing her audience. She was spinning a narrative where she was the survivor and I was the monster. All because I refused to pay $68,000 to watch my own daughter get married from a laptop screen. A younger version of me would have been devastated. I would have wanted to defend myself, to comment, to explain, to scream. "I paid for the dress, I paid for the flights." But I didn't type a word. In the shipping industry we call this noise. It's the static that happens when a deal goes south. The amateur panics and makes noise. The professional stays silent and checks the contract. Brittany was posting hashtags. I was about to legal notice. I swiped out of Instagram and opened my contacts. I scrolled past Brittany and Preston. I found the number for the Chateau Delete's events director, a woman named Madame Laurent. We had spoken months ago when I put down the initial deposit. Brittany wanted to talk about boundaries on the internet. Fine. I was about to show her what a boundary actually looked like in the real world. I dialed the number for the Chateau de Valette. It was late in the day there, but I knew Madame Laurent would still be in the office, frantically refreshing her bank feeds. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with professional anxiety. "Lo, Madame Collins, we are still waiting for the transfer confirmation. The florists are refusing to unload the trucks." "Good afternoon, Madame Laurent," I said. My voice was steady, the same tone I used when negotiating shipping rates with Maersk. "I am calling to update you on the status of the contract. As of this morning, I am formally withdrawing as the financial guarantor for the event scheduled for this Saturday." There was a stunned silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "Madame, I do not understand. You are the primary signatory." I corrected. However, due to a material breach of agreement between myself and the beneficiaries, I am exercising my right to cease all further payments. You have the deposit, that is all you will be receiving from me. But madam, she stammered, the balance is outstanding. Who will pay for the catering, the security, the rental? Mr. Preston Vanderbilt is the groom, I said, emphasizing the last name. I have been assured by his family that they have significant resources and specific standards. I suggest you forward the remaining invoices to him immediately. If they are as wealthy as they claim, a $68,000 wire should be a minor inconvenience. I will have to speak to legal, she said, sounding faint. You do that, I said. Have a wonderful evening. I hung up. I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter. I had just transferred the weight of the world off my shoulders and onto the people who claimed they could carry it better than I could. I drove to the office. The routine was grounding. I swiped my batch, poured coffee in the break room and sat at my desk, surrounded by manifests and bill of ladings. Around noon, Mr. Henderson, the CEO, stopped by my cubicle. He is a man of few words, 70 years old, built like a tugboat and sharp as a tack. He leaned against the door frame, watching me type. You're hitting those keys hard. Today, Diane, he said. I stopped typing but didn't look up. Just clearing a backlog, sir. He walked in and sat on the edge of my desk. He picked up a stapler, turning it over in his large hands. I heard you cancelled your vacation days for this week. Thought you were supposed to be in Paris. I finally looked at him. Change of plans, the logistics didn't work out. He studied my face for a long moment. He didn't ask for details, he didn't offer pity. He just nodded slowly, looking out the window at the container ships docked in the harbour. You know, in this business, he said quietly, the hardest call isn't figuring out the route. It's knowing when to jettison a container. Sometimes you get cargo that's toxic, it starts leaking. If you try to save it, it corrodes the hull and eventually it sinks the whole damn ship. He set the stapler down and looked me in the eye. You cut the container loose, Diane, you let it sink and you sail on. It's not cruelty, it's survival. He patted the desk twice, stood up and walked out. I sat there for a long time, the hum of the office air conditioning filling the silence. He was right. For 30 years I had been trying to keep the toxic cargo on board, thinking that if I just worked hard enough I could fix it. But you can't fix a leak that comes from the inside. I turned back to my screen. My personal email was open in a minimized tab. A new notification popped up. It wasn't from Brittany. It was from my bank's fraud department. I clicked it. Open, and the cold professional resolve I had built up suddenly turned into ice-cold fury. They hadn't just tried to guilt me. They had tried to rob me. I stared at the red banner across my screen. Security alert, attempted unauthorized access. Vanguard Retirement Trust. IP address location Paris, France. They tried to log in. My hands hovered over the keyboard. It wasn't a hacker, it wasn't a glitch. It was Brittany. She knew my old password, the name of the golden retriever we had when she was 10. She had tried to break into my retirement fund. The audacity wasn't just emotional anymore. It was criminal. I felt a strange cold sensation settle in my chest. It was the death of the last tiny shred of guilt I had been holding on to. A daughter who insults you is painful. A daughter who tries to rob you is a felon. My cell phone rang again. It wasn't Brittany this time. It was Madame Lauron from the chateau. I picked up. Hello, Madame Collins. She sounded breathless, like she had been running. I do not know how to say this. We followed your instructions. We presented the final invoice to M. Shaw Preston's parents, the Vanderbilts, and I asked, leaning back in my chair. The card was declined, Madame. I paused. Which one? All of them, she whispered. The American Express Black, the Visa Infinite. We tried 4 different cards. The bank returned the same code every time. Insufficient funds. I sat up straight. Insufficient funds, I repeated slowly. But they are. They have a crest, Madame Lawrence said, her voice dripping with panic. But apparently they do not have $68,000. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a freight train. The intimate guest list. The Google Earth exclusion, the urgency, the pressure. It wasn't about tradition. It wasn't about me being too blue-collar for their photos. They were broke. Preston's family, the people who looked down on me from their high horse, were living on fumes. They were asset-rich in name only, probably leveraged to the hilt, drowning in debt to maintain an image they couldn't afford. They didn't have the cash to pay for the wedding. They never did. That's why they needed my $68,000. That's why they needed my $42,000 before that. I wasn't just a contributor. I was the financer. I was the only person in this entire equation with actual liquid assets. They weren't trying to hide me because I was an embarrassment. They were hiding me because if I showed up and started asking questions, their house of cards would have collapsed. I was the mark in a long con and my own daughter was the accomplice. Madame Collins, Laurent pleaded. The caterers are packing up, the florists are leaving. Without payment the wedding is cancelled, please. I understand your position, Madame Laurent, I said, my voice eerily calm. Will you help? No, I said, but I suspect you're about to see a very interesting show. I suggest you don't refund the deposit. I hung up. The rich in-laws were frauds. My daughter was a thief. And I was the only one standing on solid ground. My phone rang again. This time it was Brittany, but she wasn't texting. She wasn't sending voicemails. She was FaceTime calling. She was desperate. I looked at the screen. I adjusted my glasses. I took a sip of my coffee and then I pressed accept. The screen filled with chaos. Brittany's face was swollen, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. Behind her I could see the grey sky of Paris and the blurry figure of Preston packing. Frantically in a tuxedo that suddenly looked like a costume. "Mom," she screamed, the sound distorting over the connection. "Mom, please, they're leaving. The florists are taking the arches down. You have to stop them." I leaned back in my office chair, holding the phone steady. "I can't stop them, Brittany. I'm not the client anymore. Remember, Mom, stop it." She was hyperventilating. "Preston's parents. Their cards aren't working. It's a bank error, a glitch, but they won't wait. You have to wire the money now. We'll pay you back on Monday, I swear." Preston shoved his face into the frame. His hair was disheveled, his eyes wide with genuine terror. "Diane, please, my mother is devastatingly embarrassed. This is a misunderstanding. Just send the funds. We are good for it. You know who we are." I looked at them. Really looked at them. The panic in their eyes wasn't just about a wedding. It was the panic of people who had been pretending to be giants suddenly realized they were standing on stilts and the wood was cracking. "I know exactly who you are, Preston," I said softly. "You're broke." He froze. "You heard me. It's not a bank error. You don't have the money." "That is insulting," he sputtered, his face flushing red. "No," I said. "Insulting is telling the woman paying for your party to watch it on Google Earth. Insulting is treating the person who fed you like the help." "Mom, please," Brittany wailed, shoving Preston aside. "I'm your daughter. How can you do this to me? Everyone is going to know. I'll be humiliated." "You humiliated yourself, Brittany," I said. "You chose the image over the reality. You chose the classy in-laws over the mother who worked double shifts to buy your prom dress. You wanted a fairy tale, but you forgot that fairy tales have villains. And guess what? You made me the villain." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm sorry about the email. I'm sorry about the Google thing. Just pay them." The word hung in the heavier than the silence across the ocean. "What?" she whispered. "You talk a lot about class, Brittany," I said, my voice steady and final. "You think class is a chateau in France and a last name people recognize. But let me tell you something I learned moving cargo across oceans. Class isn't about what you own. It's about paying your own bills. It's about treating people with dignity. And right now, the logistics manager in Seattle has more class in her little finger than that entire family has. Their bank accounts." I paused. I looked at the rain hitting my office window. I checked the weather in Paris. "By the way," I said, "it looks like rain. I think Google Earth has a great view of it. Good luck." I tapped the red button. The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The wedding never happened. According to the grapevine, which travels faster than any ship, the fallout was spectacular. The vendors sued. The Vanderbilts were exposed for having massive liens on their properties. Preston and Brittany broke up 3 weeks later. Apparently love doesn't conquer bankruptcy. I didn't step in to fix it. 6 weeks later I was standing on a balcony, but not in Paris. I was on the deck of a cruise ship in the Greek Isles. The water was a blue so deep it looked like ink. I was wearing a sun hat and holding a glass of white wine paid for with the money that was supposed to buy flowers for people who hated me. I pulled out my phone. I opened the archive folder. I found the spreadsheet named Sunk Costs. I selected it. I hit delete. I took a sip of wine and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The wind was real, the peace was real, and for the first time in my life, the view wasn't on a screen, it was mine. If you believe that respect should be the price of admission to your life, if you enjoyed the story, hit like and subscribe for more story, share this story. You are not alone. God bless you. Thanks for watching.